Hello everyone, it's Royderman, and welcome to a Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament hosted by Chu. Basically the YCS The Pond. 8 players, 7, basically competing with a set list of cards that Chu is basically testing before he puts the set into action. For here, I have a generic win deck made to just spam out some more win monsters and hopefully power up them as well. For the side deck as well, I also took into account that I may also be going against other elemental decks as well. Hopefully, all duels are post-commentary, so I'm more or less just going to explain my thought process of what I was doing and hopefully put in something that can be entertaining. I'll meet you at the first duel. So our first match was with Mr. Nito, also known as Incog, who has joined us plenty of times. And his deck was more of an Earth-based deck, so I started off with just trying to just get rid of any monsters, but he summoned out a powerful monster and then attacked it to my Gyroid. After that, Water Life on the Gyroid, Hammer Shot his big monster, which unfortunately I do take life point damage. And at this point, I more or less try to stall him out while I try to get Windrose out. And unfortunately, he starts wiping out my monsters one by one. I put Spear Dragon in defense mode because Gaia Power gave him a lot more power to work with. Unfortunately, my deck was not giving me much cards to defend myself with, so at this point, he takes game number 1. On the next duel, I did side out some cards to deal with its Earth cards, but we both basically kind of brick at the start of this. I basically baked all his Waboku, and I set a few more cards face down. At this point, he tries to summon out 2 powerful monsters. I Regeki break both his powerful monsters. At this point, he has 5 Earths. I Soul will release all 5 Earth monsters into the grave so he can get his Elemental Lord out. I summon out Bug, and we're still at a standstill. And at this point, I can introduce one of the most annoying Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards in this tournament, if it gets to the point. I attack into the Night Watchman, he Wabokus, Mandator Bugs my Bug, and I change the attribute to Water, which will become a very big mistake later on in this duel. Because I could have taken that extra 15 points of damage and lived. I summon out my own Windrose, destroy his field spell, but he decides to go and destroys my Gyroid. Of course, I stop him from doing that, and I destroy his Giant Rat as well. He summons out another Giant Rat, I summon out my statue, kills Giant Rat, and stop him from summoning out other monsters. And of course, now we go into Dino Suing, which, unfortunately, I did not plan this out well when going against Dino Suing in this duel, because I had a card that could easily get rid of it. Well, Spear Dragon was able to get through its defenses easily, but only for one time. But yeah, I had a card that I had attribute a wind monster, but because I changed the attributes to water, I couldn't use my own wind attributed trap cards. And because of that, he started overpowering me and destroying my monsters one by one, especially when he uses spell cards like Super Rush Recklessly, which basically means he gets to kill any monster I have. And at this point, he starts wiping out my monsters one by one. And at that point, I couldn't do anything else to defend, and we basically go into the loser bracket since this is double elimination. So, I'll meet you in the first match of the double elimination. In the first match of the losers round, we go against Demary, also known as Nick, and he's also playing an Earth-style deck, but not really much of an Earth-style deck. I don't know what kind of deck he was playing at the moment, but he did ran a bunch of Earth monsters. Of course, I start off strong with a Bug, negate attack and such. I do draw into my bait doll and do waste one of his cards, being an impenetrable attack, so that's nice. I get rid of his Giant Rat, he special summons out the Dino Suing, which this time does not bother me at all. Because at this point, I actually had a plan to deal with it. But first things first, I wanted to get rid of a background that he had. So, I just more or less kept pressure on him until I got a Spirit Dragon. And he decided to try to trap hold my Spirit Dragon. I decided to send his Dino Swing back into his deck. And then I proceeded to keep on the pressure. Along with that, he does play a card that I did found interesting, being the Battling Box in his hand, which he does recover life points from. Of course, he does keep up his defense, so I do have to respond with just basically keeping on the pressure. Of course, he goes for the Giant Rat, which he plans on basically getting Dino Suing the moment I destroy that. Which I do go for the free damage, but unfortunately he takes no damage because of impenetrable attack. Of course, it's now just a matter of time where I make an error thinking I could increase Dino Suing's attack to 3,000 and then hammer shotting the stupid thing, which unfortunately killed off my own monster. He activates his Shard Grade, draws more cards, and decides to get rid of my field spell. Luckily I had a defense drop, so I didn't take much damage from Dino Suing. And this time I actually decided to hammer shot the Dino before it got anything off. So at this point he starts getting some free damage onto me in this one, so there was really not much I could do but just wait it out. So, and of course he starts summoning out more monsters like Night Watchman, so I can't really defend against it if I get Gyroid or even double basically my defense. But more or less, I actually wanted him to do that because I get to basically special summon out my monster, which allows me to send a card back to the top of his deck, so I'll be able to get an advantage. Along with that, I get my Windrose off and start destroying monsters from left to right. Of course, he still had Battling Boxers in his hand, so he's gained life points from it. And at this point, it's again more or less I try to keep on pressure. I bait doll his impenetrable attack, which bait doll does me a lot of help, especially the fact that no matter what, if they try to stall me out, I do have bait doll to keep a deck up. Now, of course, I keep on the pressure, and he does reduce my attack in half, delaying the duel a little bit. And of course, he summons out his own Elemental Lord, which I respond by doing Regeki Break. Of course, he gets his Dino Suing back, which I just basically say I bring out an insect, bring the Dino Suing back to his deck, and keep on pressure, and hopefully that he doesn't bring out an Art Dino Suing, which unfortunately he does have an Art Dino Suing in his hand. I decided to try to go for game, which unfortunately there is a Dino, but I do have Garuda, which its effect basically changes the monster position. So I changed Dino Suing to attack mode, and on my next turn, I basically go for attack. He tries to stop me at least one last time, but I still get my attack to go through. He's a giant threat to bring out Manny and Bug, and I take game number 1. In game number 2, unfortunately, I did not start off with the best conditions. 2 Hammer Shot and a Double Wing. Of course, he goes for Giant Rat and summons out a Swordsman, and about a minute, I use a negate attack to stop his battle phase there because I knew that I wasn't going to survive that. I try to hold off until then, but he actually had a lot of pressure on me. I try to go for Gozen Match to eliminate one of his monsters, but Regeki breaks it. I stop him from destroying my Double Wing before anything else. And at that point, I decided to go for a Hammer Shot and get rid of one of his monsters so my Double Wing will stay alive. Of course, he gets a Night Watchman, which bypasses my effect, and basically, I can't really keep up with how much pressure that he's putting up. And along with all that pressure, I basically end up losing a lot of life points because I don't end up not drawing the right cards. I do try to go for a Spear Dragon, to hold him off for a little bit longer, but unfortunately, there was some point in the duel where he draws into something. Oh yeah, I go for the tricky, he goes for trap hole. So I decided to go for a special sign to keep up my cards, but of course he had Regeki Break, which ends up to a point where I couldn't even respond. He Regeki breaks my Windrose. Of course, I still have my Spear Dragon stalling him, so I basically just holding the line with Spear Dragon at this point and just hoping that I draw something that can turn this around, because even though Spear Dragon has a high enough attack points, it's one of those monsters where once it attacks, it goes to defense position. The only thing I could have really done was keep holding pressure until I basically found something to counter him. Of course, he was also basically just looking for something to get rid of my Spear Dragon. I go for the Bait Doll, get rid of his Trap Hole, and he Regeki breaks my Spear Dragon, which I responded by just getting rid of the Spear Dragon myself. But, of course, with the Night Watchman's, that did not help me out much with him just overpowering me. And I drew into nothing that I could really use, because even if I had defense draw, he still could have summoned out more monsters to finish me off in this one. So, Demiri takes at least game 2. In game number 3, basically we just start off with a defensive tactic, and so does he. Afterwards, I decide to pop off his Regeki Break. He destroys my face down. And I summon out my giant bug to take out his Dino Suin, which unfortunately still causes me annoyance. He gets unlucky with the Dice Spoon, dealing 1,000 points of damage to himself, and he starts trying to overwhelm me with his monsters. He destroys that, I go for defense draw, and I draw into a bug. I use Water of Life to bring out my giant insect, and I also bring out Spear Dragon, because I wanted to test out the theory whether Water of Life actually negates the effect or not. Unfortunately, it doesn't. He uses Giant Rat to kill my Spear Dragon, and I just keep on summoning out more bugs. I decided to do the same clash here, but I summon out my bug to take out his rat. Which at this point, I decided to just go with powering up my monster a little bit more. He brings out another Dino Suin, which I can't do much about. At this point, it's again another battle of attrition where I'm trying to keep on pressure on him, where he's just trying to defend from me. I summon out Windrose, taking care of his Shard of Greed before he can benefit from it, and I also summon out Garuda, so on my turns, I can make Dino Suin go into attack mode and force a lot of damage onto him. Unfortunately, I do make a misplay here where I attack into Blade Fly, not realizing the attack buff going up. But at this point, I basically just use Garuda's effect and just basically win the duel here. See you in the second duel. In the second match, we go against King Eevee, who uses a water deck. Unfortunately, we both brick and only have a spirit monster to really use. And by spirit, I don't mean a spirit monster, but basically I have the spirit of the winds while he has the spirit of water. We both basically stop each other from doing dumb stuff. I decided to do Bait Doll on him. He Regeki breaks my Bait Doll. And we basically wait until one of us gets a monster, which unfortunately neither of us are doing very well right now. Of course, I decide to place a card face down. He summons out a red sea snake. I try to get some life points out of that, but he said no. So I had to discard. I ended up getting my monster discarded, which I decided to get my monster out on the field and start going for damage. Of course, he has the hammer shot, has a Mother Grizzly, and starts pressuring me onto my battle. of course, he stops me from doing that, and we are back to the standstill that we were at. But unfortunately, I have no hand, and he's got a monster. Which, at this point, I start looking for ways of getting out of this. And unfortunately, a trap hole does not stop a water spirit. Which, unless I drew something into it, he wins this duel. I did summon a bug, but unfortunately, I do get a summon out of it, but his monster can actually change the position of my monsters, so defending was not much of an option for me here. I stopped him from summoning out another monster, and I also try to increase my defense. And at this point, I had a monster who was going to suffer me a lot of damage if I couldn't figure out a way to get past that. Which, I still get at least one more turn in. I do try to bait doll another card. He basically activates his trap on my monster, which I do get a powerful monster out and turn it around in my favor for a little while. Because he goes for a hammer shot, summons out a Shocktopus, and basically wins the first game. In the second duel, I actually started off very strong that I decided to go with a barrier statue first, where he responds with a giant red sea snake with a stim pack going for 3,000. I decided to go for Draining Shield to gain 3,000 life points. And at this point, I found an opportunity where I decided to put my monsters in defense mode and wait for him to go for another attack. He goes for that attack, I decided to start to rush him and summon out more monsters. And basically have a field full of powerful monsters. Unfortunately, he had his own cataclysmic monster, so I had to destroy that and get past everything else. But, of course, he also had the Waters of Life, which basically gives him a free monster on the field and basically takes out what I did for rushing him. I do have DNA transplant, so this time I actually do go to win attribute just so I keep my benefits. But unfortunately, I had no monsters at that time. Well, I did have a Spear Dragon, which didn't make me no good. And at this point, I was just basically looking for some sort of defense. I decided to reduce his attack so I wouldn't take that much damage. I put a monster in defense mode, and hopefully that I can survive a lot of the attack onslaught. And basically, I just go on the defensive in this one. And I do draw a Soul Release, but at this point, he starts taking out my monsters one by one. So at this point, I summon out a bug who basically does that to me, and I suffer a lot of damage at this point. Which I haven't lost the duel yet, because if I didn't use DNA Transplant, he would have overpowered me. But at this point, I decided to just summon out, basically get rid of his graveyard, summon out Garuda, and at that point, I lost the duel, and that was basically the game. So, at the end of all that, I ranked 5th in the YCS The Pond. I had a lot of fun with this, which I didn't expect that to do what I did for plays. There was a lot of mistakes, I will admit, that I did that I should have done. But, thank you to Chu for hosting this, and congrats to the person who won this, and basically the rest who also participated in this tournament. Next time on my channel, another project or video.